Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Legal Talk. I am your host, John Mitchell. We are here on the Now Media Network. And boy, oh boy, am I excited today. I'm overflowing with joy, as we might say, because today I have superstar immigration attorney Ingrid Perez. Ingrid, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. It's our pleasure, man. I know you're going to have a lot of excellent, great information for the audience out there, and let's dive right in. The inquiring minds want to know, right? I've got a bit of curiosity here. Hopefully, you can clear this up for us. Okay, talking about visas, right? Somebody wants to, they're an entrepreneur, they got that entrepreneurial spirit burning within them. They want to come to the United States, live that American dream. All right. And so, what kind of options, what might be a specific visa option for entrepreneurs that want to come permanently? They want to be a permanent resident in the United States. What kind of options do they have?
Sure, there are several options, and I can discuss them briefly. So the first option would be a visa called EB-1A for extraordinary ability. This is the first preference category of this visa based on employment, and it's available for entrepreneurs who've reached an international level of success, for people who have extraordinary ability in business. So that's option number one. Option number two would be a visa called the EB-2 National Interest Waiver. These are for people who are self-sponsoring, so entrepreneurs could self-sponsor for this green card, and they can come to the United States through their enterprise if their work is in the national interest. So for example, they are going to be creating jobs, creating significant economic movement, or working in an area that is of specific interest to the United States. And the final option would be a visa called the EB-5, which is one where if you have the money, you can get it. For an entrepreneur who's willing to invest $900,000 or $1.8 million in a business enterprise, they are able to get permanent residency through that visa.
Okay, so that's three good options that people out there might want to be taking a look at, and that's very great information. Now, let me dive in a little bit more. Let's drill deeper and find out about that EB-1A visa, internationally recognized. It comes to mind, right? A guy like maybe Elon Musk, right? So if I know he's from South Africa originally, but he's in the U.S. now. But let's say a guy like Elon, right? Is that kind of what we're talking about? Internationally recognized business people?
A guy like Elon could definitely get an EB-1A. Obviously not everybody is like Elon, but they've reached a certain level of recognition internationally that they could qualify for an EB-1A. However, the EB-1A is really difficult to meet the eligibility criteria. Immigration is very strict. So it does naturally exclude a lot of people in this category.
When you said the word, it stuck out to me, right? As an attorney myself, I listen for these key words and phrases, right? And so you said the word self-sponsor. What kind of what does that mean?
So typically to immigrate to the United States through employment, you need a sponsor. So that is an employer who's offering you a full-time job in the United States and who is willing to go through a very lengthy process called a labor certification. The whole idea is to make sure that this new person coming into the United States is not going to exclude US workers. So the law requires a company, an employer, to go through this very lengthy process to make sure American workers are not excluded. And that process is difficult, expensive. Not everybody has a US employer who's willing to do that for them. So options like the EB-1A or the EB-2 NIW allows you to self-sponsor, meaning you don't need a job offer, you don't need an employer. You are immigrating to the United States through employment based purely on merit. So whether it is through your extraordinary achievements through an EB-1 or because through an EB-2 national interest waiver, you are coming to work in the United States in an area that is of national interest.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so you don't need a sponsor because basically you are the sponsor, right? So that's good.
Exactly.
That's good information. Now,
Exactly.
I'd also, it stands out to me that you mentioned the 900,000 and the 1.8 million dollars. What's the difference between those two? Those two numbers. How would one fit into one category versus the other?
Sure. So for the EB-5 program, for the EB-5 visa, there are two types of investments. The first one is a minimum or $900,000 investment that you make in something called a regional center. A regional center is sort of like an entity that pulls together investors' capital contributions to this big investment pool. And from that, you're able to get a visa through the EB-5. So it's a designated regional center, maybe like a big hotel or a theme park that takes outside investors' funds to invest the project, right? And through that, a person can get an EB-5. If that's not an attractive option for an entrepreneur and they want to invest in the United States through their own business, they need to spend at least $1.8 million. Obviously, there are other requirements too, like job creation, all of that. You have to show that your funds are coming from legitimate sources. So it's a lot more complicated than that. But the minimum barrier to entry is that $1.8 million that the entrepreneur is going to be investing directly in their enterprise.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Oh man, this is so good. This is such good information. I'm so happy and pleased to have you with us and have you sharing that great information out there. Now, this brings up a question in my mind, right? Like, let's say if I were a foreign guy and I want to come live that American dream, and I want to come to America, right? I'm looking at these options. Now, I'm not as smart or as handsome as Elon, and I don't have, $1.8 million. So what might be the best kind of option for me in that kind of circumstance?
Maybe an EB-2 national interest waiver. We immigration attorneys call it EB-2 NIW. You speak to any immigration attorney, they'll know what an EB-2 NIW is. The EB-2 NIW is great for entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs cannot self-sponsor, right? So it is one way that an entrepreneur can come to the United States. However, the endeavor or the proposed work that the entrepreneur is coming to do has to be in the national interest. And that is there's a very clear definition, right? So national interest means you're coming to work in an area that is of strategic importance to the United States. And I can give you some examples. I've worked with entrepreneurs who worked with engineering, right? They are engineers by trade and they have an engineering company and they're coming to the United States to set up an engineering consultancy firm to offer services to maybe a construction company or the government or other areas within their engineering profession. I've done entrepreneur EB-2 NIWs, for example, for a person with a food fabrication company in their home country, and they were coming to the United States to bring their product over. And this person specifically was working with gluten-free products that were organic, ethically sourced. And the argument for the national interest of that endeavor was that Americans have gluten intolerance. We need more gluten-free options. So things like that, right? I did another one for a person who's an entrepreneur in their country, and what they do is they refurbish machinery and equipment for small manufacturers and resells it in the secondary market. So the argument for that was, well, he's coming to the United States to help the United States circular economy, right? Keeping these machineries and different equipment out of our waterways and landfills, and giving small manufacturers an opportunity to add these important equipment to their operations and not spend an absurd amount of money trying to build up their businesses. So you got to be creative. You got to think about it in those terms. Job creation is really important, right? Investing in the U.S. economy is really important. So working with an immigration attorney is really important to kind of define that case for immigration.
Yeah, well, you folks heard it out there first. And so, very important to be able to find a qualified professional like Ingrid to be able to walk you through all the complexities of this. And so, my final, I guess, kind of question that, flows naturally from what we've talked about. So, let's say that last option that you gave us, the EB-5, How would somebody go about? What steps would somebody go about? How would I do that?
Well, the way that I work, at least when a person contacts me and they're interested in an EB-2 NIW, I do an initial screening. They have to fill out a questionnaire, provide some information, maybe a CV, so that I can do an initial screening. And then we have that first initial meeting to really talk about the endeavor, their background, what is this case going to look like, what types of documentation do they have. And then once they decide to hire me, we proceed to prepare the case. The person gives me all the documentation that I need. Perhaps we invest in a business plan, right, that has financial projections for the business, that explains how many employees they're going to hire, that describes how much money they've already spent, in the investment in the United States. And we prepare the entire case and we send it to immigration. I think it's also really important for people to understand that there are backlogs for these types of cases because the demand is very high and the supply of visas are very low. So it's important to be working. It's important to work with an immigration attorney who understands this and can give you a strategy that best sort of fits your needs, because you're going to be waiting quite some time for this visa and eventual green card to be approved.
Right. Well, I mean, that's like just like I tell my clients all the time when we're dealing with the IRS. Don't measure this in days, measure it in months. Right? Like to
Yeah.
get your calendar ready because this is going to take a while. So, man, Ingrid, I am so happy and appreciative to have you with us on the show, and that's excellent, great information for everybody out there. So, let's say if somebody wants to find the best immigration lawyer out there, how would they go about contacting you, Ingrid?
Go to my website, ibplaw.com. All my contact information is there. You can send me an email, call me on the phone. It's all there.
Oh my God, that's wonderful, Ingrid. Well, again, like I said, thank you so very, very much for being on the show. This has been Legal Talk. I'm your host, John Mitchell. We are on the Now Media Network, and we will be back next time with you. Thanks again, Ingrid, for being with us.
Thank you.